Hi, this is Jenny from the Sewing Palace in Helena, Montana. We're at the online quilt along month 12, block 12. Can you believe it? Our online quilt along has been going and we are in the last block, which is called Christmas Star. The quilt is by Kate England and it's double dozen. So let's look at our block. All right, let's look at our block. This is the Christmas Star on point in the traditional colorway. The center can be a medium or a dark. These star points are called for as a dark. And then we've got some flying geese units that could be a medium or a dark. And then these outer star points could also be a medium or dark. And on this colorway, there are two triangles right here. And on our sample, they're all lights, so you don't see the little points. But we'll show you in the other colorway what it will look like when you change the colors. So here's the Christmas Star in another colorway. Here's our center in a medium, our dark points, our outer flying geese in a medium, and then these outer star points in a medium. But you notice the difference right here. These are those little points that you couldn't see in the other colorway, and we changed them to a real bright colorway. It just changes the look of the block. So have fun picking your colors for your quilt and your units. Let's get a few supplies together for your block. We've already talked about the fabrics, and maybe if you want to change anything out or brighten things up, you can certainly do that. I do have some mediums and lights and darks, and then on this block I added a color. You'll also want some starch material, which we use a product that we've mixed, Best Press and Terrio Magic, and it just adds a little bit of oomph to your Best Press, so that's a nice starch substitute. We're using obviously the pattern book from Kate England, double dozen. We also, for this block, we're going to be using a Bloc lock ruler that's for flying geese, and the finished size is 2x4. The other Bloc lock that we'll be using is a half square triangle, and it's a 2.5 or larger, but this size will cut the block perfectly. You'll need some sort of marking utensil, some scissors, a rotary cutter, a lovely Bernina sewing machine with a 1/4 inch foot, some thread, and you'll be off and running. All right, so the Christmas Star is broken down into some basic units. This unit right here is a 4-patch that has half square triangles. Those half square triangles finish to 2.5 inches unfinished, so the finished size is 2 inches. Then we've got our center triangle that is cut at 4.5 inches. So this unit right here is made up of some 1/4 square triangles and some flying geese. Right here is the flying geese unit, and that flying geese unit is what we're using the Bloc lock ruler for, or you can follow the Kate England method using connector. And so that flying geese unit should measure 2.5 by 4.5 when it's unfinished, and so should this unit. So there's some 1/4 squares and some half square triangles there. So we're going to do a little bit different method for this using Bloc lock rulers and the half square triangle units. So let's dive into that. All right, let's talk about the half square triangles. There are a total of 8 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. When you make a half square triangle unit using the method I'm going to show you, you'll yield 2 at a time. And we're going to square them up so that they measure 2.5 unfinished. So let's look at some of our fabrics. So herein are the kit that we've provided in class, or you could cut some strips out of your stash. You'll want a light and a medium. And I'd suggest cutting those strips about 3.25 inches. And then just lay them right sides together. And we're not going to do much for cutting to start. We're just going to do some measuring. So if you were to follow the book, you'd be cutting 2 7/8 inch triangles, squares, and then cutting them into triangles. So I'm just going to round that up, and I'm going to make some marks on the fabric that are about 3.25 inches apart. So I'm just marking about 3.25, and I would just work my way down so that I have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4 solid marks on my fabric. Okay? Once I've made those marks, I'll then mark diagonally. So I've marked that line, and then I'm going to line up my diagonal right here, and I'm going to mark there and there. I'm going to move it down. I'm going to mark there and there. So now I have kind of a zigzag pattern marked on my fabric. What I'll do next is I'll sew on each side. I'm going to flip the fabric over. Hopefully you can see, well, you might not be able to see the stitching, but what I did was I sewed 1/4 of an inch away from the line all the way down, and then on the other side of the line all the way down, back and forth. And then when I'm done, that's sewn. Okay? Now you just whack them apart and you'll trim them down with your block lock ruler. So we've cut this off. There's not a whole lot of measuring at this point. You're going to press nicely towards the dark, and then you will lay your block lock into place so that it lines up on the seam and it's diagonal, and then you will trim all the way around using this 2.5 inch finished block lock ruler, and your unit will be perfect when you're all finished. That's the beauty of the block lock ruler and using it at the end, because your perfect measurement is at the end. So there we are. We have a nice 2.5 inch finished half square triangle. Let's talk about the next unit of your Christmas star block. These units right here are flying geese units, and there's a couple ways you can make them. The method in the book is connector squares. You have to cut quite a few connector squares and you add them to the sides. You could also use the block lock ruler, which we've talked about. The flying geese unit that you would need for that is a 2 inch by 4 inch finished. You can make them 1 at a time, or you can make them 4 at a time. We need 4, but we'll show you how to do that as 1 at a time. I'll give you the math for 4 at a time if you want to do that, which is on this chart, and it's this right here, and you're going to cut 1 large square, and that large square is going to measure 5.5 by 5.5, and that's going to be your medium. And then you're going to cut 4 small squares that make up the sides of the unit, and those will each be 3 1/8 inch square. And then you'll follow this method using the no waste, which we've covered in previous videos. I'm just going to review 1 at a time here, so let me show you how to do that. So we're going to do the 1 at a time method for flying geese units. Remember our strip that we marked and we made half square triangles? We still have quite a bit of that strip left, so we're going to use those 2 pieces to make our flying geese. And these pieces, the dark unit is cut 2 3/4 by 4 3/4. You need 4 of those. And then this, the light, you need 2 3/4 by 2 3/4, and you'll need 8 of those, 2 per flying geese unit. Okay, so let's go ahead and cut those up. I've got a unit here started. So this is my medium, 2 3/4 by 4 3/4, and 2 per of the light, and those are 2 3/4. You take those and you lay them so that they line up on the edges, and then you're going to sew diagonally from point to point, and then flip, and then you'll do the next piece just the same. You'll lay this down, sew diagonally from point to point, and then you'll have a unit that kind of looks like this. All right, so then you'll have something that's sewn, and then you'll take your block lock ruler, lock it into place, make sure you have your beautiful 1/4 inch reveal, and then you'll square that up and you'll have a perfect 2 inch by 4 inch finished flying geese unit. All right, you guys are almost done. We're going to talk about this unit right here that makes those beautiful star points. Remember, if you want a nice contrast, this little bee unit has the potential to pick a really fun fabric right there. So this is your dark, and that's a half square triangle, and then there's 2 1/4 square triangles sewn together, and then that sews to that. So when you're looking at your book, when you look down on your dark D, that unit is a half square triangle, and your dark C is cut 2 7/8, and then it's on the diagonal. So prior to cutting that, really starch it heavily, and we used our magic press, which is a combination of Best Press and Terrio Magic, and then cut that 2 7/8 inch piece and then on the diagonal. So you have a nice stable piece of fabric that doesn't have a lot of stretch to it and is pretty stable. So 2 7/8 and then in half, and you'll need a total of 2, 4, 6, 8 of those half square triangles. The other units that you're going to be cutting is the light and the dark B, which are these. So let's pull the book away for a second. One thing I do want to point out, when you're all finished making this unit, it should be 2.5 inches unfinished. So that's a good way to check yourself when you get to that point. So let's look at this when I've already got it cut. This was 2 7/8 in half, and this cut was 3 1/4, and then it's cut twice, so it's cut more like this and like that, so you get 4 out of it. When you go to sew these together, you have a mirror image. So when you sew this to this, you've got the pink on this side. That's opposite. If you lay them on, lay them on top of each other, they're mirror images of each other. So you want to be conscious when you're sewing those together so that you have them lying up into your block correctly. So you have a mirror image there and there. Then you're going to sew the dark to the light, and you'll end up with this unit here. This has potential for stretching because you have lots of bias, so be careful, use a nice 1/4 inch seam. And when you get to this point right here, you can use your block lock ruler that we used earlier, which is 2 1/2 inches unfinished, and you can lock it into the seam and check to see if you're close. You can square up your block, you can cut off your excess dog ears, and have a nice perfect 2 1/2 inch block to sew into your quilt. So that helps it make it a little easier to sew. All right, you guys did it. You made the Christmas star block, and now you are in month 12. You have 12 blocks done. You can now start putting a quilt together. Don't forget, you do have the Double Dozen book, which has an on-point layout that is a diagonal set. It also has 6-inch blocks that are added to make the quilt a little larger, and then a border print. You also have some other optional layouts. If you want to just take those 12-inch blocks and sew them together, you have this cute little quilt here. It's also on point, but it's just the 12-inch blocks. Or you have this cool layout with sashing and the 6-inch blocks integrated into the quilt. So lots and lots of choices. Stay tuned, we'll be showing you a finished quilt in the future and sewing it together. So thanks for joining us. This is Jenny from the Sewing Palace in Helena, Montana. Bye-bye.